So hi everyone. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for taking your time to follow this presentation. Me and Federico here have put it together because it kind of reflects the work we've been doing along the last 2 years. So JBS together with Spin 360 building a science-based strategy to continuously reduce the environmental impact of the lead that we produce, and we wanted to share with you today what we learned along this process. So, Federico, I don't know if you have any other words for this introduction.
No, Kim. Well, good afternoon, everybody, also from my side. Yeah, I'm thrilled to share our experience with the audience because, as you said, there has been a lot of work, 2 very intense years of work, and a lot of results, and still ongoing.
Absolutely, long road ahead. And I believe, as a context, well, this is, of course, evident for everyone, but the corporate mindset and the world has started to change and adapt to the necessities of a climate menace to humanity. So as we can see here, this is just one example from Fortune Global 500. Companies have started to adopt more aggressive strategies. And we saw the first COP happen in 1995, and we saw 5 years, let's say, of denial of climate change, another 5 years of acknowledging climate change, but at that point, it wasn't anthropocentric, so it wasn't our fault, let's say. At one point, people started acknowledging that around 2003, 2004, that it was caused by humans. And in 2015, we finally had the Paris Agreement. We now had the COP26 with it was a very anxious moment for everyone looking at definitive actions to actually tackle the problems we have to tackle. It didn't happen as everyone expected, I guess, but it did start to change things a bit. So for the first time, fossil fuels was mentioned as completely something that should be addressed for us to be able to think about achieving the targets established in Paris, even though the wording has changed a bit from phasing out fossil fuels to phasing down fossil fuels. It is all still very relevant because we have to rush on that. But of course, besides fossil fuels, we have to, this is a reality for all the companies, big companies especially, that can make a difference. JBS has made a commitment to achieving the net zero goal by 2040, and that's our everyday discussion in here. And as you see, the work we've been doing has a very big connection with that. And it's scope 1 through and 2 and 3 emissions net zero. So we are also talking about raw material and service, so including ranching related impact, but of course the energy we use, transportation, and of course the facility operations. But before I move on here, and I'll give the word to Federico because I believe he'll have a lot to add on this. But it's important for us to avoid the carbon tunnel vision and think everything is about carbon. That's a tendency from all these climate change discussions, which are indeed urgent. But we do have to look to other menaces we have. And this concept from 2009, the Planetary Boundaries concept, it does show that we can see here climate change has already past the threshold of certainty, so it's already in an uncertainty zone, and we see the plot showing that if we don't control our emissions, we'll soon get in big trouble. But as we can see, we have other biosphere related menaces that have already passed the uncertainty zone, and they are beyond the uncertainty zone. And as we uncertainty zone, and as we can will be able to see in the work we do address other impact categories because they are, of course, of equal relevance to climate change. Federico, any thoughts here?
Well, Kim, from our perspective, being myself an environmental scientist, I am very, let's say, pleased that what you were showing before, now 38% of Fortune 500 companies having clear commitments towards a climate action, very important. Among these the work of JBS, but I think you recall also and you remember during the work done together the different dimensions of the environmental impact. So climate is not the only is not the only asset to work on. There are many others. We always say that sustainability or environmental footprint is made of many different dimensions. And so this slide you are showing is perfectly picturing that. And therefore also, and as we will see in the presentation, taking decisions based on numbers and on science is increasingly important, isn't it, Kim?
Absolutely, and it's urgent, right?
Yeah.
Um, and of course, we don't want to sound here like the doomsday, someone talking about doomsday messages, but sometimes we have to address it that way. Um, so this is a screenshot, a summary of the way we address the strategy for a continuous improvement based on data. So it is about assessing our supply chain based on a life cycle assessment perspective, gathering data and from machines, from processes, from anything we add into the process. So it's a very detailed work. And I believe Federico will be able to add more elements here. But the important thing to say is here the right part of the slide. So to be able to interpret the data efficiently, to simulate it, and to continue to improve, which is the moment we are now in our journey, is the most exciting part, because this is where we are starting to see active actions to further decrease the impact. Federico, any thoughts here?
Well, Kim, you basically said most of it. This is a slide we normally use when we have to explain a set of concepts more than a slide that we normally use to explain the journey in which you engaged some time ago. And you're right, we're not only making a hypothesis here, we're simulating results of these hypotheses. So, I think it's going to be clear also when we look into the numbers that the life cycle perspective is also changing the way in which companies were addressing their environmental impacts. So we come from a decade in which a lot of companies has started, I don't know, putting in place efforts without the knowledge of a life cycle perspective. And there are some aspects of the environmental impacts of leather making which were totally not addressed in the past, but will be in the future. So hotspot analysis, proper data interpretation, and simulation are the key for the whole journey we're going through together.
And this is a summary of what we've done so far and what we plan to do. So so far we've ran LCAs for more actually than 30 products already, in 6 plants, 4 different countries. And the amount of data we collected along this way was, well, but this is just the internal work. But the thing we really wanted to share with you today is the improvement plan. So I believe this is of the most interesting part. So what have we learned from it? And this is what's dictating our work since September last year, and it will take the whole year of 2022 surely, and some parts of this plan will stay with us within in the mesh of our sustainability strategy for the future. And this is just a plot of the different articles we've modeled. So as we can see, we have different results because the LCA is a bottom-up approach, and it has very specific results regarding different production process, different supply chain configurations, and so on. So the variability exists, and this is good because we learn from the the bad performing products, and we learn from the ones that perform well, so that we can share the best practices in every one of them. And you'll be able to see that it's this learning from the different results is an integral part of the strategy we have ahead of us.
On this, Kim, I would like to add one point. That is, it was very interesting for us um, to carry out this exercise, especially because you were also looking at the values of some experimental products. So what we are looking at this slide no, are results on some products that are in production, but as well some hypotheses of formulations that you could have decided to put into production, but then based on the results of this analysis and something we will see also later on, maybe for the moment you decided not to, because it had an environmental footprint that was not satisfying your expectations. Isn't that so?
Exactly, it is, and it's the challenge is to be able to effectively connect the different areas within the company, so whoever's planning production, whoever's selling product is up to date with this information to be able to position the best performing articles in the market. And here are the hotspots. So this is, of course, just a summary, and this is just global warming potential. So, and you'll see this is absolutely connected to the strategy with design for from here onwards, because as we can see, 53%, this is an average of all those LCAs we did, is comes from raw materials. And this is very significant because if we want to talk about global warming uh, within the leather product, we cannot disregard the upstream impacts, and we have to have a strategy for that. And then second one in the list is chemical use.
Well, it would be very interesting, Kim, to look at the future in this perspective. I will just I would like just to anticipate the fact that yes, we're speaking about 53% coming from raw materials in a context within which life cycle assessment, high quality data on animal farming are not broadly available. So this is one point. We are talking about a major hotspot that is based on potentially not enough data. And this is the first thing to mention, probably. Second one being, as I was saying before, that look at where energy, electricity, and thermal energy are. No, we're speaking about a residual, I would say, component. So that this is something that I think your management found very interesting, but in generally, these data are very interesting to board members because they are actually to be used for defining future priorities that potentially are not, especially in the leather sector, so much linked with setting up, I don't know, solar plants, for example.
Yeah, and this is how this is interesting because it is a very useful information internally, because being a verticalized company, we can better engage with our colleagues from the beef division and engaging with actions they are taking. Well, the company as a whole is has agreed to being net zero, so they are already doing a lot of work in this sense. But being able to connect the impact of farming with leather allows us to get some leverage and engage in the discussions a lot more. And I'm sure we'll be sharing some amazing news on farm related actions for the near future. And this is well, please, Federico, explain. This approach is very interesting to have the average of all the weighted average of all the impacts. But I believe it will be better to come from your
Correct.
words.
So what you mentioned before, Kim, was that we looked at the hotspots, considering GWP, global warming potential. And in that case, we had 50% contribution of raw materials. But then, as we said before, global warming is not the only environmental aspect that we should be considering. And therefore, with you, we carried out an exercise considering also different elements such as eutrophication, abiotic depletion. I know that for the audience, maybe these words are not so familiar. Eutrophication is the phenomenon for which there is a lack of oxygen in fresh waters, mainly due to fertilizers and growth of algae. Abiotic depletion is when we take non-renewable resources from the earth, and water use is the one that is simple to understand. So if we put in place also this element and not only global warming, then the priorities are changing, and chemicals are more relevant than raw materials. Raw materials decrease their importance. There is also the growth of importance with respect to transport. But one more time, 90% of the impacts are represented by chemicals and upstream raw materials.
So the top two don't change, right?
Yeah,
And this is and this is what based the strategy we will share here. As I said before, this is the exciting part of this presentation. So what are the key actions? What can we do to focus on those two main hotspots and have a successful strategy for the future? And this will be true for the kind-led platform, but also for everyone else making leather, actually, because even though they are data sourced specifically from our process in some level of precision, it will be true for other leather makers, absolutely.
Let's say that this is a process of open source innovation, Kim. So we're making a gift to the market.
Exactly, Federico. And so there are four actions. We'll kind of go over each one of them here. So the first one being to be able to improve process. So to learn what's providing the impact. So those graphs we saw before, they are more macro, but here we're seeing the data is actually very granular. So we can see the impact per chemical. We can see the impact that comes from increasing yield of the material by optimizing the way we use the material. So by not looking at leather as only an upholstery material, but something that is collagen initially, and how we can better deal with that. So all the variables we can actually simulate and improve. And we've been doing this with a very close support from Spin to provide us the necessary tools to do that. So Federico, I think even though we are the ones helping here in the development and using the tool, you are definitely the best person to explain how we're doing that.
Well, Kim, yes, and again, I would like to publicly thank you for being one of the early movers in the direction of simulation, life cycle assessment, and simulation. which is exactly this the suite of products and services we're working on. And basically, the concept is pretty simple to enable users to make decisions based on facts. So the what if is the classical question, no? So what if we could get to the same leather quality with less or better processes? And well, to do that, there is quite a lot of analytics and data to be provided, but now we are there, thanks to you, and we are able to simulate processes on the efficiency perspective, on the environmental impact perspective, but also, as you very well know, on the economic perspective. So it's what we call life cycle assessment, but also life cycle costing. And yeah, I think it's uh, this innovation is hopefully here to stay.
It will. I think it will definitely be something all tenors will be able to somehow have access to, and at least know what it can provide to their sustainability assessment, because it's definitely been helping us a lot to design what we think are the correct strategies to reducing the impact. Second action is to engage with our suppliers. And well, as any sustainability related discussion is about looking at the life cycle perspective, you cannot have this tunneled vision, this restricted, well, only look at my tannery, for instance, because you are very limited in the actions you take, but also in seeing the impact from a moralistic perspective. And so partnering, getting closer to our suppliers, specifically from chemicals, is crucial, because in the LCA models you do have to include what is the impact of each chemical, and you have two ways to go here. If you don't have precise data on the chemicals, you have to rely on proxy data, which is good enough. It does help us to assess and to get close to the precise impact of that chemical we are using, but it's of course to be able to get a higher quality data, and higher quality data is a message that can go to all other sources of data
Exactly.
here.
Yes.
Yeah, but in chemicals specifically, of course, the discussion gets more complex, but it's the way to go. So we've been working and getting closer to our suppliers, and working on ways to provide more clarity on what is the impact of the production of their chemicals. And this will be, as we saw in the top two impact sources, well, absolutely fundamental for the work we have ahead of us.
On this scheme, I would like just to add briefly that it's really good to see that market leaders of chemicals are moving very rapidly in the direction of analyzing the environmental impact of their products, and also to be able to provide tanners and the whole supply chain at the end with high quality data. So we're currently relying in some cases on approximations, which have been done through a very long exercise and collective exercise, but the movement towards provision and use of high quality LCA data on chemicals is surely there.
Third point here, net surface area. This concept has been, well, it's been in our heads for a while now, but we've seen through this, the LCAs we did, that we are even more confident of the route we're taking, and that's the route of looking at raw hides as a raw material that can be used for leather. But if it's a particular area of the hide that will become well, be too high on defects or statistically tend to be thrown away in the end, it doesn't make sense for us to do that, to tan, re-tan, and finish it from an environmental perspective. It will tend to become waste in the end. At least the most part of those sections of the bellies, let's say, or of the neck area. And well, and this is what the kind leather concept is about. But furthermore, more than going beyond kind leather and what we are doing at JBS, I believe this is a concept that will become the standard practice in the future when looking at reducing the environmental impact of leather as a whole, because it just doesn't make sense from an environmental perspective to just produce everything and later on whoever is cutting to deal with low performance parts. And from and as we can see here, this is just to illustrate what it is all about. So it's about providing in the end higher yields, but from the environmental standpoint to minimize waste and to make sure that allocation is done intelligently by redirecting the parts that wouldn't be used as still as collagen, keratin, and fat only to someone else, some other industry that will effectively use that with a lot more efficiency. And so the calculation of the impact as a whole will definitely be lower per square meter or square feet of the product. Again, just an illustration, but we can see that the waste amount is a lot lower. And well, that's the way we are approaching our environmental evolutions inside the company nowadays.
Well, Kim, I think that you very well explained what is the point of view of JBS. Who started the concept of kind leather? When was it? I think 3-4 years ago, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
And I would just like to emphasize one point. We discussed many times the fact that tanners should be looking at themselves probably also like collagen transformers. So basically, the raw material is, of course, a piece of rawhide, but at the end of the day, is made of keratin, collagen, grease, and some other elements. So the concept here is the so-called co-production to create and get the most of the value of each of these components, which are proteins or organic molecules that are entering the system. So that if we think about something that cannot be worked to produce a finished article, but it's finished, then what can you do with that? You can just waste it, or maybe do some recycled materials. But instead, if this part is taken out very early in the process, the alternatives for co-production are many more. So as you said before, from collagen to amendments to fertilizers to feed and you name it. So there are companies making a lot of wealth on this set of materials.
And last point here, well, this I believe, Federico, you share my excitement here. We've
Yes, I do.
been working, we've been working for a while on this concept. This is the Biomed Competence Center. It's focused on, well, sharing knowledge, gathering knowledge, being a hub for scientific publications, and also for discussions with in a pre-competitive environment. Here, well, I'll let Federico share more his detailed ideas on this, but it will be Spin 360, the one that will gather um, the technical information and to guide this journey of the Biomed to be able to address the impact of rawhides and what it's fair and what it's technically sound to be attributed to leather, but also extended to other materials. Again, I just wanted to state here that at this point, it's a completely open environment where JBS, its role has been only to give it a push to make things start to happen, to kick things off. But it will have a governance very well established, where anyone is invited, anyone has the same weight inside, NGOs, companies, leather makers, chemical producers, anyone, actually. So with the common goal of bringing more clarity and more technical information on the impact of the raw materials to bio-based materials. Federico, please, I'm eager to hear your words here.
Kim, we are in a moment in which it's a kind of there is a lot of contradiction, and this contradiction is based on poor data. The contradiction is that on one side we are looking at a global hunger for bio-based chemistry, for example, but at the same time bio-based materials are under threat. So what we are looking at, and we are really witnessing it daily, is a trend to consider some of the variables we were mentioning before more important than others, and therefore in this case some synthetic and oil-based products are gathering in image with respect to natural-based materials, bio-based materials. Leather is one of them, but we're also speaking about cotton, silk, alpaca, wool, and you name it. Silk is the material that has the worst heat index score of everybody. So, and this set of metrics that are penalizing biomaterials are based on science, yes, but maybe old science and a limited set of data. So you said it very well. It's a pre-competitive environment. Actually, is a non-competitive environment because we just want to produce knowledge. We are totally neutral. It's not going to be pro or con anything. We are very open, excited to go. In Spin, we have a full team being created, starting from the agri-food business. We already have opened the door to some scientists, also thanks to your support. But this is just the beginning. So I really hope that during the show, there will be occasion to speak with the different actors more in detail about this very exciting project.
Well, and everyone, this is it. This is what we wanted to share: our vision, our four strategies for the future. And well, Federico, I couldn't thank you enough for being with us along the journey. And well, thank you everyone for taking your time again to be here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kim, Federico. Really interesting presentation. It was great to watch. If I could ask a couple of questions, maybe if I could start with a question for you, Kim. You mentioned in the presentation that raw materials, or hides in this case, was highlighted as a hotspot. Obviously, as JBS has a sort of integrated supply chain, is there any kind of leverage that you can apply to help reduce this particular hotspot?
It is. So we are talking internally of many actions related to ranching, but the challenge here is on, the thing is, LCAs, they need validated data, they need published data to be able to be used as input. So even though we are using primary data for our specific processes, to be able to use an input in an LCA, you have to be able to describe different farming practices, but to be able to publish and to enable these data sets to use that as a factual information, as an input. So the work goes beyond our day-to-day work. And this is the importance of Biomed, because Biomed, and we'll be working close together to it to be able to represent and to provide data on our specific suppliers, but it has, of course, to go way beyond our our production system, when we're talking about leather and as a whole, right? And as to reposition leather as what people are looking for, which is a natural based material, a durable material that should be used in the future if we want to achieve our climate goals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Federico, obviously with your experience of compiling data for these LCAs for various leather manufacturers, what elements of the process have you found kind of the most difficult to obtain most accurate data with your experience?
Well, surely one of the key elements is exactly that we described before on raw materials. I'll explain you why. It is all linked with traceability. So the possibility of getting exactly to a specific farming practice, which is easy in some cases. We are speaking about a case in which traceability is rather easy for the integration, but more difficult in others. So supply chains in leather and in the supply of hides sometimes become a little bit difficult to explore and to deep dive. We all know the key role of abattoirs, where sometimes traceability is lost because beyond the abattoir is very difficult to go. And if you're not able to link a specific farming practice to your leather, then you rely only on, I think, Martin, you are very well aware of the long debate on the allocation on leather. So, but the key point here is we have been debating for years on how much to allocate. Yes, but then we have not been debating on what to allocate. Mm-hmm. So this is the key point. So if I allocate 10%, 20% of a regenerative farming, super smart and well-conducted farm, I'll be happy to do that, no? Because then is a very good practice, which is low in unitary impact. So raw material, I would say, is number one in difficulty to obtain reliable data on. Yeah. And this is why we created, thanks to the idea of Biomed.
Thank you. Kim, coming back to you, obviously going through this LCA process with Federico has been an interesting thing. Have you found, as a business, has been any financial benefits, as well as obviously the obvious environmental benefits of doing this process?
Well, as an engineer from an engineering background, I tend to be a lot more comfortable when I'm making decisions based on data. I mean, this changes absolutely to me what would be an evidence-based management compared to, I don't know, intuition-based management or based on what we think is right. And this the LCA approach has been good for us, of course, in this environmental paradigm, but inefficient use of anything is definitely directly connected with the both dimensions. So whatever we reduce, it will have a higher or lower, but definitely a reduction in cost. So to be able to understand this, it brings to us a win-win situation from this data. So as soon as we are able to add this cost layer, which is something we are doing right now, so it helps us in understanding what the environmental actions also help in cost-related discussions. But we work in corporations, and this also helps us to make decisions faster, because when it's something that will help environmentally, but also help in the bottom line of the company, it's a very immediate decision. It becomes a lot easier. So we definitely are starting to work with these two layers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. And Federico, final question for you. Should any sort of tanners or leather manufacturers considering sort of going through this LCA process Would you recommend that they really look closely at what sort of chemicals and machinery they look to source in the future? Will that help them in this process?
Well, the LCA provides support to make these decisions as well. Yes. As Kim was saying before, there is now in place a procedure for also assessing and evaluating chemical alternatives based on LCA. And regarding machinery, there are some machines, some of which we collaborated to work with and to work on, that already have this LCA and costing embedded. So we will be presenting at our booth a project that we call the Smart Drum. And thank you for the question, Martin. So I'll be happy to share with the audience that we developed exactly for the purpose in collaboration with well, a famous company named Ital Progetti. So I think, yes, machinery will help. There is already machinery gathering data, and this is a 4.0 approach to LCA. And chemicals, again, a hotspot, quality of data increasing, large corporations really started to be very collaborative on this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Federico. Thank you both very much for your time today, for doing the presentation, and much appreciated. Really interesting information.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks.
You too.